In this video, I'll be installing the Computer Lab plugin for AccuSQL 2015. The Computer Lab plugin allows every computer in a computer lab typically to be its own sign-in station. So what happens is you install the plugin on those various computers. When you open it, it locks the computer. In other words, the Computer Lab takes up the entire screen, at which time a student sits down at the PC, enters an ID and/or ID and password that unlocks that computer. They'll get a floating box in the upper left corner. They use the PC, and then when they're done with it, they close the Computer Lab. It goes back to a locked state and waits for the next student to unlock it. Okay, so you may have gotten a USB key or another installer. I'm going to launch AccuSQL.exe here. This is the installer launcher. By the way, if you have the AccuSQL plugin dist here, distribution, that has the installer included in it. But I'll go ahead and open the installer launcher here. And then what I can do is mouse over these various items. I'll click here on Computer Lab. And if I have the Computer Lab installer, it will allow me to run the installer from here. If I didn't have it, it would show me PowerPoints and various information about the Computer Lab. But I'll go ahead and install it here by running the installer. And that will install Computer Lab plugin on this PC. Click Next, Next again, read and accept the license agreement, Next. And I'd recommend the default path, which is CompLab SQL 15. And it may take a moment or two to install. Okay, now I'll click Finish, and I'm hiding my desktop icons for this recording, but you would have a shortcut on your desktop. But we can go out to the folder where it's installed, C, Program Files, in this case 64-bit, I have x86, and then I'll go to CompLab SQL 2015 or 15. Okay, and here's the actual Computer Lab SQL exe. So I'm going to open that the first time, and what we'll see is it's asking for its database directory. Okay, since it's a SQL Server database I'm going to be connecting this to, I don't really need to be too concerned about selecting this directory. So I'm going to cancel this, but I'm going to show you what happens behind the scenes when you open that. Out in my users public documents, it creates a folder here called AccuTrack, and then an I folder, which is the I folder is created based on the installation path of the Computer Lab. So I'll open that, and I have two files in there. These files store the parameters or the connection information to my database in an encrypted format. So I opened the Computer Lab and then canceled it just so it would write out my two DB param files here. Okay? So now what I'm going to do, now that I've got my DB param files waiting to accept information, in my folder here I've got a utility called setDataPath. Okay, now you'll already need to have your SQL Server database out there waiting to connect the Computer Lab to, but I'll go ahead and do that. Connect SQL Server here. Okay, now the application shared path, that's a folder that you can use to put different information in, like shared reports, shared photos. If you want all users to get an update, when one user downloads the updates, they would pull from the shared folder. For Computer Lab, shared folder is important if you are using local labs. Okay, so a good example might be you have a computer lab, a math lab, and a reading lab. You would want to put those computers on the same shared path. We have some different files we write out there that are used for local lab settings. Okay, so you can go ahead and either put in a UNC path like so, or you can map a drive letter. It's up to you. So I'll go out to my ENG server if I see if I have a share I can point to. And I have Accu Files folder, so I think I'll go ahead and point and use that. Okay, now I'm going to put in the information for my SQL Server to connect to the SQL Server database. And I'm specifying a port here. If you're using the default port 1433, I believe it is, then you wouldn't need to specify the port. and I'm going to use SA credentials here to connect. Now if you already have a public folder, or excuse me, a public user, you could enter that. And you create that public user at the time that you transfer the database to SQL Server using AccuSQL. Okay, but now I'll click here, and in a moment or two, it will populate the list of all my databases that are out on that ENG server. And I'll go ahead and pick my AccuSQL 13 testing, test my connection. Now, by the way, if you're trying to connect to the database and you get a OLE iDispatch error or an error trying to connect, check your connection parameters, but it may be you don't have the SQL driver installed on that PC. Okay, so in the folder here where I have the computer lab installed, I have an SQL drivers folder, and then I have a 32-bit or a 64-bit installer for the native SQL Server client connector. So you would need to run that if you see that error and you're sure your connection parameters are correct. Okay, but I'll test it. I'm happy. I'm going to save that path now. Okay, and now it's written out to that dbparam file, and I can close. And now I can go ahead and open my computer lab, and it will be pointing now to my SQL Server database out on that ENG server. Now I open it, and this is what it looks like. This is what the computer lab would look like on each of those various PCs. If I log in as an administrator, which is the same as the root administrator ID you log into AccuSQL with, I have a few settings in here. Oh, got to get the password right. Okay, I have one database location, which I just set using my SQL database connector. Okay, but I also have local labs. So if you're using math lab, reading lab, computer lab, etc., you would pick the local lab that you want to set the computer to here. Now, out on our YouTube channel or in our reference manual, we have lots of discussion about how local labs work. So I would recommend that if you're not sure about local labs. Okay, but I'll return back to my sign-in screen, and then I'll go ahead and sign in with the student ID. And I didn't say specify password. And now it wants me to update my information. Okay, that's fine. And again, these are settings that you create in AccuSQL, and I'll show you where those are for Computer Lab. Here's a list of my classes, and I'll sign in. So now the PC is unlocked, I'm signed in, and now I can use this computer as a student, and then when I'm done, I sign out, and it returns back to a locked state, and it waits for the next student to unlock it. Okay, to exit the computer lab, I can just use a root ID and password and click the exit button right here. Okay, now briefly, I'm going to go ahead and open AccuSQL, and I need to point it to that same database. So I'll log in with the default ones and new, since it's a brand new database. Go to my database, database location, and now I get to put my SQL Server information in again. I would probably set the same shared path, typically, that I'd set before. And AccuSQL 13 testing, save that. And now if I change data path in AccuSQL, or the computer lab for that matter, I do need to exit it and then reopen it. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, and then down here under add-ons, right here, I have a setup tab. So click on that, and then computer lab options. So here's where I set the things about what I want to happen. So I could say, for example, when a student signs out, I want to log out from Windows. I then want the next student to log back into Windows, and I can pass the login credentials from Windows to use as the computer lab sign-in, for example. Another one here, I can say if after 10 minutes of nothing happening, I'm going to make the assumption the student has walked away, and I'm going to automatically log out of the computer lab. So there's various settings in here that you can adjust. Okay, so I'll go ahead and save that. And then the other thing, very briefly, if I go look at my categories and activities, I have here something called computer usage, academic and personal use. And let's see what else I have. I guess that's it. But what I want to show you, the reason I'm mentioning that is, see, it says computer lab right here. Okay, computer lab. So what I've done now is specified that if I set the local lab on a computer lab to my computer lab here, that I want academic use and personal use for computer usage to be available in that lab. So that's how you determine which activities appear in each lab. Okay? So what I would do from this point on is install the computer lab on all those various PCs. Make sure I have the native driver installed if I get that OLE error. Then I'll go to my database location. I'll open it and close it the first time, right, to write the DB param file out to my public folder. Then I'll go log in, set database location, put in my shared folder, enter all my SQL Server information, pick my database, test it, save it, move on to the next PC. Okay? And then after that, you're done. Okay, thank you.